Alright then, hello everyone. This is Kanzuki Dynasty, and we have Brilliant on the line here as well. Oh ho! Welcome to the stream. Anyway, this is our Monday Battle Lounge, with space for a few rookies. If you are interested in joining us, you can see the password down there on the bottom right. This is being restreamed to our 2_MK main channel from my personal channel, Kanzuki Dynasty, with my full permission. So, without further ado, let us begin.
Well, there's a little ado because
okay. Well,
I have invited the wolf, and he may be joining in time to start off the lounge.
I see. Well then, I suppose we can give him a moment.
Today I'm going to be looking at general low-level playstyles that you can use for various things. And in particular, at the zoning playstyles that can be used with certain characters, as well as good ways to keep them out of spacings. So, for example, when it comes to Alex and Cammy, there is a specific thing that they can do in terms of their interactions with each other that you can easily learn early on into the game. Basically, Cammy can't throw out a second standing medium kick in neutral without Alex being able to whiff punish the first one with standing medium punch. This means that as much as it seems as if Alex and Cammy should be able to play footsies, it comes down to whether or not Alex gets into a certain range by walking forward or not. The reason Alex players often don't do that well is because they're trying to charge up for Alex's special moves, which allows Cammy to reposition herself to where this doesn't work. So the short version of this is, Alex beats Cammy better if he doesn't use any specials. In fact, Cammy as a character is actually relatively weak to characters with long-standing medium kicks, because it forces her to try to use her own or do random stuff in neutral. The overall benefit to this for Cammy players is that they can learn over time to use crouching heavy punch and standing heavy punch at a very specific range. But none of these things come up if the Alex player is focused on doing their specials. It's easy for Cammy to put on pressure from there and generally win, especially if they are particularly focused on their uppercut or getting used to the ability to air throw pretty much anything Alex does at a certain range. So the key here is to bypass your automatic responses to fighting Alex and specifically play footsies. As long as the Alex player refuses to let up on their special moves, you have free reign. And this is where the concept of footsies is created for most lower level players. They eventually recognize there is some match where it's just, you know what, I just do better if I don't use any of my specials. And this can be frustrating to some people. because they want to do their specials, they want to play their character to the fullest, but you eventually have to understand that playing your character to the fullest sometimes means not using everything they can do. As you can see, while it was not the entirety of Kansuki Dynasty's plan for this match, it does pay off in the long run, especially because Alex doesn't really get to use his own meter very well if Cammy is playing this style. So you can literally, until you reach a certain height of opponent's skill, just disregard the fact that he has meter altogether. He probably won't get a confirm on you, and if he does, it doesn't matter. But to understand the initial thing I was saying, it is specifically that until you start to hit the standing medium kick, and then usually block, the Alex player doesn't have a lot they can do against you other than hit crouching medium kick of their own, which is a bad idea for Alex, or hit their standing medium punch while walking forward. So I'm going to take a quick moment now to invite one of our other members to this. And while they join up, we'll have another match of this type.
Let's do this.
And a quick, before the match starts, I'll pass it over to Kansuki Dynasty to give her opinions on the match she just had. Although at the moment I probably need to double check the microphones in general. Because I can't hear her at all, interestingly.
Okay, let's rumble.
For those who I wish to protect.
Round one.
Oh, someone actually bought this stage. Now, of course, the problem here, based on what I was explaining before, is that one had to understand why crouching medium kick isn't a good idea for Alex to use, which is not easy to understand innately. But the main reason is that Cammy's stand heavy punch is a 6-frame standing normal that is plus. So she really can just hit that button. She can do stand medium kick into stand heavy punch, and the situation is in her favor.
Round two. Fight.
But again, footsies is difficult because we spend generally a lot of time thinking about how to not get hurt, rather than how to set up a situation in which your opponent is the disadvantage. But she is flatly a footsie character who is able to put a lot of pressure on people who try to hit her after certain sequences. She does it well when she's up close, and she does it well when she's far away. So that is what allows her to be both a push, rush down character, and for the most part, a footsie's character as well. It's basically the same thing about Cammy, just manifested in two different ways.
Round one. Fight.
That situation, for example, you can see Cammy just flatly wins. There's pretty much nothing that happens at that stage except that. And that is not necessarily a thing Cammy cares a lot about. The issue then has more to do with your reactions and becoming confident in that situation than whether or not it is a good idea for Alex. As a general rule, Alex hitting crouching medium punch against Cammy leads to him losing. Crouching medium kick against Cammy leads to him losing. And crouching standing medium punch is required to get away with a lot. So if you've met an Alex who specifically feels as if hitting crouching medium kick is the way to solve his problems, in a Cammy match you've pretty much already won, except if they have extremely good timing on that. Because as you can see, that move actually doesn't beat a whole lot of things Cammy does in the first place. Nearly any button Cammy hits on reaction to him going up in the air for the head crush will win. Movement, everything. Cammy has to be focused so heavily on the ground game that Alex can't force her to think about to get hit by that move that is almost never going to happen. Now this might give the impression that Alex is a poor character because he can't handle Cammy well in that way, but as I said, I already explained how this is supposed to work. To beat Cammy, Alex just has to not do special moves. Because he has so much good advantage preemptively when he uses all his regular moves, such as stuff like that, and good spacing from his stand medium punch and stand medium kick, that he just doesn't have to do it. In fact, this stage is perfect for showing it off because you can see that they get to stand almost exactly on those two ring marker lines, and pretty much nothing happens. They don't have to move away from each other. It's literally just footsies. Now, it's not the dancing around kind of footsies that people are used to in certain other games, but if they know what they're doing, it's pretty easy to deal with.
You lose.
My mic was off this whole time. Well then.
Yes, it was.
I see. Huh.
But now
Well,
that
I
it's
guess-
back on, and now that you're not actually the one playing, you can
Indeed.
give us your feedback on this during the next match.
All right then. I suppose this explains why you did not repeat the thing that I missed you hearing. But, in any case, as soon as Suntier and Dewolf here ready up,
Well, it's not like you have to wait for them to do that either.
indeed. But anyway, well, I was just commenting, apparently silently into myself, on how I was not expecting the crouch heavy punch to low profile his jumping attacks, and may have to do that more. Otherwise, however, I was noting earlier how it's a little difficult for it's been a little difficult for me to refocus myself on thinking this way and paying attention to this sort of mindset, because I have traditionally played somewhat of a more rushdowny, pressury cami, even though that's not quite necessarily my personal style innately. And I have some of the habits, including mindset-wise, regarding that. The other thing that I was finding in the last match was that I was not figuring out where to place my stand heavy punch to make that a useful button in this case. I remember you noting that right after a stand medium kick, but I don't remember if that was actually for me or for Alex at the moment.
Okay. Well, when your next match rolls around, I'll explain it in more detail, but for now, I'll go into making my comments on this one.
Certainly.
So we've got minor shifts in flow for now here, but you can actually see sort of some of the same things with the Kuma. It is rather that when Alex hits crouching medium kick, his crouching medium kick is fairly negative, while at the same time pushing him to a point where him throwing out other buttons, unless they are mediums, isn't necessarily a good idea. You can see them coming, or he really shouldn't hit certain ones against your character, and so on. In other words, as soon as Alex hits crouching medium kick, the footsie stage of what he's doing is sort of over. This is not true against every character. This is more so true against the characters we are dealing with today. So if viewer does not play basically Ken, Akuma, Chun-Li, Juri, or Cammy, the things I'm saying aren't really relative to their experience. But in general, when Alex hits with that kick and you block it, it means that it is now your chance to hit a longish range heavy button. And if you do so, he must respect it and block it, because if he tries to hit anything himself, it will often be countered.
Alex wins. Round one. Fight.
Ah, yes. One more of my own thoughts. The other one that I probably silently expressed was regarding how much my anti-airs had been hurting my... Well, how basically my lack of anti-airs was my main source of taking damage and having trouble with him, at least for the first portions of those set of matches. Slightly less at the ending. After everything here explained a little bit.
That sort of thing also is difficult for people who get used to special moves in games to overcome, because people teach you, for example, you should anti-air with your uppercut, which is probably true at least to some extent because there are many situations in which that's the only option you safely have. But when you are in footsie, there's usually a single button you can use because you have relatively more control over the spaces involved.
Right. And what I don't have, actually, that I will obviously need to develop, following from that consideration, is sort of awareness of, based on where I am right now on the ground, what anti-air button I should use if I see him jump, and just priming that in advance based on that knowledge of positioning.
For example, if you do hit the crouching heavy punch and it is blocked, you probably don't need to worry about your anti-air because the spacing that creates makes it really easy to just back medium punch. And the back medium punch is fast enough to also clip if Alex attempts to dash without risking very much to you at all. But Alex can, of course, get over that by trying to do his own forward heavy punch, I believe it is. But he cannot use forward heavy kick at that specific point very easily. So it gets... there's a lot of trading conceptually. So it's a simple chart mentally. You hit crouch heavy punch and then you get ready to hit back medium punch. That's it.
Right. See, the other problem that I encounter is that I'm in the recovery of the whiffed crouch heavy punch when he does land his jump in, so I can't do the anti-air, but...
Well, the point there is, you should only hit the crouch heavy punch after you've blocked crouch medium kick, because then it won't live. It's not very complicated.
Yes.
This isn't to say that if he just immediately does crouch medium kick into something else, that you won't get caught by that. But that's a different level of the game. Once you realize that your opponent has changed the way that they play after certain things, you can just change and go back to what you were doing before.
Yes. Now, the second problem that I encounter, as you're seeing here, and somewhat, is a matter of patience, actually, because while you do have a point there with the timing of the blocking crouch medium kick into the crouch heavy punch, but I tend to not want to sit around a lot, just based on my habits, and I suppose based on my general experiences with, well, not playing very footsies setups with people.
That is part of the reason why charged characters are so important in the way they play. Because charged characters are by nature more predictable.
I see.
If you hit crouching heavy punch, Alex either is going to hit another button or immediately attempt to do that head crush or stampede, because the moment he moves in any direction, he can no longer do either of those moves.
I see. Oh, but so the only way he can control his range is, in fact, by sacrificing his charge, which makes me safe
Yes.
again. Sure.
He can still do elbow stuff, but Cammy doesn't usually care too much about this. The problem is that fighting game players are not immediately taught to focus on sequences when they're taught to play the game. They're taught to hit buttons, understand special moves, and so on.
Indeed.
Which is why the bots are the sort of goal system that you've got, where you are basically told, follow this pattern, beat this pattern with this thing in order to get this point.
Alright, so now if I'm preemptively doing it, he's using his elbow to get in here instead.
No, he's using stand medium punch, which immediately means, yet again, that he can't actually do head crush at you.
I see.
And head crush is the thing that becomes a problem to you because it's effectively surprising. It is moving him out of the ground vector where you have to deal with that.
Sure.
But once he is incapable of doing those moves, then you can come up with a strategy based on that. Alternately, you could simply do something even stranger. One, that spacing for one thing, and secondly, you could just sweep. But that would then be bad if in the case of further head stomps, head crushes, so on. So there are some mix-ups in here. And learning them all at once can be difficult. But the idea is that what you think is just a random interaction, at higher levels, chances are that your opponent has already learned all of these things and they're controlling you already.
I see. Alright then. I mean, that does make sense. That is how you get better and better. Alright.
Part of the reason, in fact, why it is slightly better to try to hit her stand heavy punch is related to the move being plus or minus on block. Obviously, the range makes it such that it's not always a good idea to do this, but if you've got the spacing for it, you might as well.
Right. Especially since it is so fast, as you noted.
This matchup, on the other hand, is heavily predicated on Akuma's ability to do air fireballs, honestly. At the lower levels, the more air fireballs the Akuma player is capable of, the more trouble Alex generally has. Because unlike most anti-airs, you can't be sure that you're supposed to do it. Nearly all of Alex's anti-airs are slow enough that they will fail. Other than his jab, which gets him nothing given that the fireball hits at a particular timing. Akuma's dive kick is less effective, but still works fairly well actually. So there are some matches where without a particular tool for your character, you don't have enough control over the match to make it feel as if you're doing the right thing most of the time. Now normally this is made up for by the fact that characters with a lot of tools often don't specifically need to use any given one. The best tool doesn't always mean that you have no other options. For example, the same ability to dive kick with Akuma instead of throwing the fireball. If you can't throw the fireball in the air, the dive kick will sort of do the job. Probably enough to force your opponent to have to worry about their reactions and let you get a real match, quote unquote.
Alex wins. Round one. Fight.
Now, back in the glory days of the arcades, this information was obviously learned much more slowly because no one had any frame data to work with.
Yes. You'd have to
They did it
experiment.
based on how they felt about something.
Round two. Fight. Alex wins.
Well, in case you haven't ever checked it,
It's go time.
Cammy's standing heavy punch is -3, and the crouching heavy punch is apparently only -2, though I seem to remember this being changed at some point.
Let's do this.
So, it is actually in my memory that you don't have to hit the standing one. The standing one just cancels better.
Yes. Right, I was a little surprised when you had mentioned the standing heavy punch was plus, because I remembered it being minus, not terribly, but a little bit. So it's -3, you say?
Mm-hmm.
And the crouching one is only -2. It almost doesn't need to be at the
Okay.
range it's at.
Something about these numbers doesn't seem quite right to me. I seem to remember something different, but
Alright then. I'll keep that in mind.
I'm using Tool Assisted at the moment, and I haven't actually checked either of the other frame data apps.
I would pull that up, but I will have to wait.
So right now, the key is basically play normally, and when you see crouching medium kick get blocked on your side, just hit the heavy punch button. You don't really have to look for any other timing for that button, because your normal style fits everything else fine. But yes, I thought that her stand heavy punch and her crouch heavy punch had somehow been changed to the same negative value. But I'm sure one of our viewers can help us out with that.
Got a little too excited there. Saw it, but too slow.
Round two. Fight.
I'm gonna miss this stage next year, I think. But we get to enjoy it for a full year, probably.
Well, it's not going to get erased, is it now? Ouch.
No, but I mean, they're not gonna use it.
Fair enough. Oh well. Should not have done that there at all.
Final round. Fight.
No good. But that was a matter of being too close in, I bet.
Well, your standing medium kick is again better for this job in general than the crushing one.
Alright then.
Slightly less minus, and only trivially more punishable. By most standards, technically it's not more punishable, but the input lag makes things a little bit off.
Alright. The rabbit reports that your data appears to be correct according to both frame data 5 and FAT.
Okay. That's good to know.
So it is...
One less thing to remember.
Oh wait, nope.
Crouching
I
heavy punch
misunderstand.
-2.
I actually may not misunderstand. Let's find out.
No,
Stand
crouching heavy punch
minus 3, crouch heavy punch minus 2, according to both. Some tier does not want to face me today, so back to duel.
The main point here is that Alex's ability to play footsies is heavily reliant on the head crush and stair stampede mix up, which changes a lot in neutral based on the opponent character. So it's a difficult thing for Alex players to use because if they learn it as their autopilot default, it will cause them to get really badly beaten by certain opponents. But if they don't, then it becomes difficult to get in on other opponents. Couldn't finish with the confirm.
True confirms are a bit my weak point when I'm not immediately expecting them.
Oh, that's why we gave you Balor Bot.
Indeed. Need to spend some more time with him, I think. That autocorrect. Oh man. I have no idea how it would have gone if I had pulled that off, but that autocorrect. Alright. My CA autocorrected as he crossed me up into a Dragon Pit kick. I feel like I misunderstood some aspect of your contemplation in that whenever I'm pressing crouch heavy punch after a blocked crouch medium kick, I get intercepted.
Intercepted by what?
Counter hit.
I'll keep watching, but I haven't seen that happen. What I've seen that happen, I'll point out again. I think you did get confused. It's Alex's crouching medium kick that you're hitting this after.
Oh, okay. For some reason I had...
Your crouching medium kick is -3, so you shouldn't hit anything at all.
Right, alright. That was my initial understanding, but yes, I did get it switched up at some point along the line. I'll correct that.
Round 1. Fight.
And after that range, against Alex, when you have hit crouching medium kick and he just blocks it and stays there, you can immediately hooligan.
Aha. Alright then.
Which is why I was teaching you the quote-unquote options that the other day, where
see.
you do the crouch medium kick and hit a different button depending on whether or not it gets blocked.
Good parry.
Of course, again, these are all relatively lower level tactics that you will end up refining as you go along.
But everyone has to start somewhere, of course. Stop that.
You win.
As you can see over time, that sort of thing just sort of dismantles Alex's ground game,
Indeed.
as long as he is focused on keeping his charge.
Yes, and in that match, he didn't even really get an opportunity to get into that sort of situation, I don't think. Almost. We'll see how it continues. This has more range than I thought it did.
That's a common complaint you have.
Yeah, I say that about basically every button, including the ones that I use very regularly. Problem, of course, being I can't negative edge that into Hooligan.
True. But the few times you mess it up are unlikely to heavily affect your gameplay. Also remember that you don't actually need to do the dive kick off those. That was kind of the point of that particular
This is
cancel.
true. I can let that finish.
Looks like you could use more training. Round 2. Fight. I'm all warmed up. Got it.
It can be a particularly effective way to fight your way out of the corner. Alex does have one response, but since Hooligan is in itself a mix-up, he doesn't have to... he doesn't have a way to know which one to use. Because as soon as he tries to start responding to it, then you can dive kick, and then it will get messy.
Indeed. It helps if I'd used the correct button, but even then I think he would have blocked that.
He probably parried that.
Yeah, that would have been... And that's the misery we were discussing the other day. That was not something I should have done.
Unfortunately, I don't think you've ever had the experience before to decide that it wasn't something you should do.
Nope, don't think so. Well, I'll just have to put it that way. And Wolf will need to learn not to stand up when I hooligan. Although, actually, that is the mix-up, I suppose, so...
That is the mix-up, yes.
Stop that.
But as Camibot has taught us all, well, not him, but you can just throw her out of that a lot of the time.
The hooligan, you mean?
Yes.
Unfortunately so. Well, on the other hand, that means I have no reason not to do this. I really need the meter watching there. That only works when you have EX for it.
You lose.
So we're back to the Alex versus Akuma matchup, probably.
So it would appear.
Viewers can note that if you do want to join the lounge, that character select is on, so you're free to practice any character you like. From the footsie side, Akuma doesn't have the same options that Cappy does, obviously. And it's at moments like this that you really start to understand the difference between the characters and how they're meant to be played. Akuma has to take a much bigger risk when he's doing anything against Alex because he has to make a hard read on when to hit stand heavy kick. And Alex does not generally have much reason to not be crouching. So hitting stand heavy kick is not one of the things that is highly in Akuma's favor. That said, at this level, it's hard to stop Alex without hitting it. Because the moment you're looking for to hit it in is the moment where it's easiest for Alex to stay crouching and get away from you. Fortunately, one of the primary reasons why this mix-up works has to do with the way that human brains perceive movement. To fake certain moves, you need to simply do the move that looks most like the other move. So Akuma's standing heavy kick, while it is not a move that has a lot of things that look directly like it, can at many times look similar to him just walking, in fact. So you get to mix up between walking forward to get into throw range and hitting standing heavy kick. This means that for the most part, it's relatively easy to catch Alex and throw mix-ups, and you can base most of your game around just walk forward, stand heavy kick, and walk forward throw. Now Alex does have his own mix-up-y ways out of this situation, but they're not that good. The only thing that makes them really effective is that Akuma is generally a lower health character. But one good crush counter from that stand heavy kick and that disadvantage disappears almost immediately. This does not work on Zangief, unfortunately, because Zangief will just ESSPD everything and not care. But Akuma can definitely do this to Alex. Ryu can also, but not for the same reason. Also, as has just been demonstrated, since Akuma doesn't really have to hit the second part of his stand heavy kick, he can do other things that are at least somewhat misleading and get away with stuff right afterwards. Because a lot of this comes down to, can the opponent react in time to a specific thing that's being done? Once you put your opponent in a situation where they can't just hit buttons and have that be the solution to the situation, that is partly what the priority system and why crush counters in neutral are strong. Because opponents must respond to and respect the concept of the crush counter in neutral. What actually normally gets the complaint is rather that the crush counter in neutral from certain characters leads to too much damage, or is a little bit too easy to land. Specifically, more so Balrog and Urien. I don't think it's justifiable to say that Lara's is too good. And I don't really think you could justifiably say that Karin's is too good. It's just easier, in Karin's case, to use it and not worry too much about being punished heavily by certain types of character. But those types of characters shouldn't be fighting Karin from close range anyway, so it honestly doesn't matter which button she chooses to hit. It's literally just her faking you out and hitting a heavy button instead of a medium one. It's effectively a frame trap that doesn't actually involve a first hit.
Indeed. Well, I personally consider it glorious, but glorious does not mean unfair. It just means I'm very happy with Karin.
Round one. Fight.
So now we're looking at this more from Alex's side, what he can do about the sort of things that Cammy does at this range. One of his main tactical methods for this is actually that despite the fact that his flash chops are negative, Cammy doesn't have a lot of good responses to them, especially if they're spaced really well. Because they cover so much of what she does, and they solve the problem of her having buttons that would beat out his faster buttons. You just don't do anything. Specific reason for this is if you've ever watched it, Flash Chop spends quite a lot of time pulling his hurt box backward. So there are things that he can whiff punish even though Flash Chop is slow, by simply using the hurt box change to move him completely out of the way.
Oh, come now.
Forcing Cammy to generally be more conservative about some of her buttons in neutral. And basically, once you've reached that level, the fight is fair again, but it has immediately jumped from what looks like exactly what the two players in this case are to Super Bronze players. to more what you would see in the Alex and Cammy matchup in Silver and higher. In short, it's possible for what you normally do at your level to be unrecognizable to higher level players, and to yourself when you get better. Some people also obviously consider it more fun, and those people often play more fighting games. They enjoy fighting games at higher levels a bit more, simply because the things they're doing at those levels are the things that they find fun. But as you can see, we already have a much closer match. We already have things that are much more dancey style, trying to figure out how to get past your opponent's defense rather than just pressing buttons in close and hoping that the other person didn't press the right button. The good part of this is that once you've gotten used to this sort of thing, it means that all of your matches with your friends or anyone who has a similar style becomes practice of that same thing. So even if you're not discovering new things about the game innately, that change helps you to understand what is going on in more plainly. For most people, the entire feeling just comes out feeling more deliberate as a whole. And people who like games of chance are not quite likely to be fighting game players, except people like yourself. And even then, they want to be able to like control the odds in their favor and only occasionally take risks. They don't really want the whole game to feel like button mashing riskiness.
Oh well. I was convinced you would chip me. Button mashing riskiness.
Okay. I've had enough of that silliness.
Actually, no idea how audible you are.
Fairly, but not too much.
Alright.
So we're here definitely seeing decision making at the level of what most people are willing to call footsies. Even your jump forwards and jump backs then take on a specific positioning style, meaning and flow to them.
Okay.
And once that happens, it becomes much easier to decide when to use your view reversal, which is usually the next level of play that you get after you've developed footsies. Your view reversal stops being a tool simply for getting out of pressure because you spend more time thinking, well, I have view reversal, it could give me an advantage here. We're not likely to end up in a pressure situation soon, so I should just use it to take my advantage now. Before this point, your mind is usually stuck in the idea that, oh, my reversal is for when I've lost the neutral and I specifically want to recover somehow so I can get back to pushing buttons. The other reasons for situations like that, where you got really high on stun, but because you aren't expecting neutral to be too bad, you don't worry about the stun as much. You give it its time to come down on its own and say, I can save the V meter for something else. I don't need to use the V reversal to get the stun down, and therefore you don't immediately think that you should block. There are a lot of layers to this in terms of the fact that people plan relatively early into their game without realizing that it's possibly affecting their entire plan system For example, here, you should probably be ready to re-reverse or something.
Indeed.
Well, you could just do that. And because you know you could just do that, the match changed somewhat. But a character who has a reversal that specifically would increase the odds of them winning in that situation would use it. And a character who knows, well, I can just dash out of this and then do something with my V trigger, will do that instead, rather than thinking, pressure is coming, I have problems, I should do this thing.
Indeed. Yes, and one of the things that I really want to get out of Street Fighter is the somewhat more deliberate experience that I have not necessarily got a lot of at my current level.
Let's do this.
Then my question to you is, do you see a layer beyond Alex's flash shot?
Not yet. Give me another round and I'll let you know.
Oh. It is entirely possible, and people should keep it in mind, that there is a bottom to the barrel. It only goes down so far until you found a situation in which both players has exhausted all their options in a particular spacing. And if they both choose only the safest and most optimal option, one of them eventually wins.
And
Of course, you're not required to do that.
Risk taking.
Now against Akuma, the flash shock system doesn't work basically at all. Because Akuma isn't trying to hit you with long-range normals to begin with, and as a result, he doesn't have long-range normals stuck out for the flash shock to hit. However, he's much, much better at quickly converting small negatives, small minuses in frames on his opponent's part to advantage for himself. Which means that Alex is in a much worse situation flash shopping against Akuma than he is flash shopping against him. Akuma can simply hit crouching medium punch, or even in some situations standing heavy punch, after flash shot. And Alex has basically no answer to this. Crouching heavy punch is a little bit off in that flash shot can be spaced so that it makes it whiff. But that doesn't always lead to anything good either. But now that Alex has light kick / elbow, that helps a lot more, because at the range where Akuma is whiffing buttons in neutral to keep Alex from dashing in, light kick / elbow is basically pure advantage to Alex unless he gets unlucky and gets clipped by one of those normals on the way in. He can even do it after throw attacks like that. Because here, you see, Alex is pushed back as far enough that actually Akuma gets nothing, basically. Alex has long enough to charge a new head crush or something. It also helps deal with a large part of that whole stand heavy kick versus throw layer that Akuma uses, without actually increasing the amount of stress that he has to deal with a lot. The key problem with it is that the move is still minus. In fact, that's probably why they couldn't make it any better than that. Because if it was better than that, Alex would just flatly have advantage here. His buttons are not bad enough that you need to care about it. Akuma would need to feel comfortable hitting certain buttons, and immediately extremely high levels of play would be needed. You would have to be able to mentally react to where the flash chop interacted with you so that you know if you could get away with things or not. As you can see, it's really effective here as an overall thing. Especially once you're in V-trigger and you can just parry stuff right afterwards. Fortunately for Akuma, that's not really that helpful to always do, so the situation doesn't always end up automatically in Alex's favor. But just being in V-trigger and using like kick slash elbow against Akuma gives Alex some mix-ups. The problem becomes when Akuma starts to throw grounded fireballs, but that doesn't really change the way Alex plays, because if he was charging down back for the slash elbow and sees the fireball and can react in time, he will get out of the way of it easily, especially since he doesn't need the meter for anything. And can just use EX head crash instead.
Let's do this.
But we are back to Alex matchup stuff. So far we've gone down 3 layers. We've seen the first layer in which Cammy can hit stand medium kick as long as Alex is not hitting stand medium punch. Cammy can therefore wait for Alex to try to hit crouch medium kick, which also helps against her stand medium kick, and when he does, hit her own crouch heavy punch. Alex then goes down one level of his own and uses flash chop at those sort of timings to avoid the problem itself. The question then is, at that point, does Cammy have any way to deal with the flash chop? And the way you're looking at that is, you're looking for the spacing that the flash chop creates when it's blocked after most of the other interactions. Because one of the larger reasons why the flash chop is so useful is that even if Cammy tries to get into the air, it does tend to clip her on the way up. So it limits her mobility quite a lot. But as noted, since it is a quarter circle forward move, it robs Alex, at least temporarily, of any of his other options, special moves wise.
Deserved that, really.
Yeah, that was a bit of overdoing.
Used my crouch heavy punch non-responsively.
Yeah, that too basically even meter at level 9.
That meter was not intentionally used, actually, so...
That worked out. So yes, as you can see, this is heavily about matchup understanding. Alex is a character against whom Cammy can just do crouch medium kick into hooligan at most lower levels. But again, this isn't necessarily true for other characters, because they have different responses to Cammy going over their head with the hooligan roll.
Dang it.
As you can see, it really doesn't normally give the impression that Kenny has a true solution to the flash shop spacing.
I don't think I've really noticed one. He seems to just manage to keep me out with it.
So, then you have to think on the next level. If he's given up his charges, what does that mean for you? What else does that open up for you, other than buttons, obviously?
Well, it means he's not going to be using his damned stampede and crush options for a moment anyway.
So I would suggest probably that after the flash shot is blocked, that you test doing the B skill. Because sure, he could react to it, but there's a lot of things that you can get done. If you realize you can't hit regular buttons, you're basically down to back dash, forward dash, and B skill.
Yeah.
Because staying at that exact range puts no pressure on Alex and allows him to get his charge back.
Yeah, and nobody wants that. Setting it to him.
Round one. Fight.
Dang. Too early, wrong button. Alright. So I do need to adapt that range to be using the heavy kick. But that also means that my reactions need to be, well, about 5 to 6 frames faster.
Round two. Fight.
Or I can try to low profile it with the... that.
The other option is obviously as shown. She can in fact just hit stand medium kick again, but after a full sequence, it usually isn't in your favor quite. Because this is, again, basically putting yourself in a situation where Alex gets to hold down back and reset what he wanted to do before.
Dang. Okay. Yeah.
You lose.
Sandera let me know a little bit before that he was leaving.
No,
So the question is whether or not Amara wants to jump in. And the answer to that question appears to be yes.
Alright then.
I think I changed this fact before. No, I did not. Now, whereas obviously your focus is improving footsies, Amara's focus lately has been around fireball game stuff. And we've definitely learned some stuff, and while it was mostly stuff I knew before because of doing a lot of research into why people who normally play zoners feel unsatisfied with this game, a lot of it was, I wouldn't go so far as to call it hyperbole, But it's the sort of reaction you get from people who are used to something, or something changes, and they're not really so interested in figuring out how to get around the change. They just want to be able to do it the old way. One of the primary things that changed between this game and Street Fighter 4 is that the knockback on fireballs is actually much, much less on block. On it, it's probably a little bit close to the same, but not even so, really. The main thing being, though, that if you have hit someone with a fireball in this game, you are not guaranteed to be safe from any counterattack on block. So your focus generally has to be about figuring out what you can do after a blocked fireball, if anything. Because the answer is not always anything at all. And therefore, how this affects when you throw your first fireball, and how important it is to space out your timing after throwing one that ended up being too close somehow. There's also some stuff about differences in the button you use for faking fireballs and similar things. Fortunately, as you can see, it's a lot different when Ryu goes into the trigger, but not specifically for the reason that most people wanted, which makes it a little bit harder for them to do this.
Wait, what just happened there?
She did medium punch after they parried jump in instead of throwing, and therefore died again.
Oh, okay. It looked like she
Well,
parried
parried
something.
again and then died.
It looked like he parried and then she parried, but it was just him parrying twice?
No.
Okay. Because I couldn't imagine what she would have parried, so...
So yes, a lot of this has to do with being ready to Shoryuken, realizing that your opponent can or cannot press certain things after you have had a Hadouken blocked. And the fact that even if you hit them with the Hadouken, sometimes the answer is to just do like Tatsu, because you know that's spacing. So the fireball game in this game technically became more complex, but not essentially weaker. You could argue that Ryu's fireball game in particular became essentially weaker, but that was only in Season 2 when they took away his standing light kick. Because standing light kick is actually so long range that if you push people out with certain levels of Hadouken, he can just hit it afterwards.
Huh. That is pretty far.
And it prevents a lot of things that they would want to do. Unfortunately, the bigger problem in this matchup, I'd say, is that because Ryu doesn't specifically get anything off the knockdown from an EX Hadouken, it requires even more skilled hit confirms. Because even though against most people, if you have just learned to do the main one, where you do the EX Fireball so that you are safe, even if you messed up somewhere, against Alex, you kind of have to actually do the EX Tatsu. Or just not finish in general with the EX Hadouken, or just accept that you don't get any ulti off it. The precise approach depends a lot on the player, but it's really more so about that sort of thing than anything else. Overall, the goal of the designers was to make Ryu more of a close-range character, but it was very difficult to understand at the beginning what that meant if you weren't particularly aware of how precisely fireball changes were done. Because it sounds like they're trying to tell you to get in, when what they were really telling you is, hey, after you've thrown a fireball, you now get to do more pressury stuff.
And it hits. Very nice.
Raw stuff like that, because your opponent is in a different mind state now that Ryu is close than they would have been in prior games. In prior games, you mostly just had to worry about Ryu doing really long sweep or something. Whereas now, you have to worry about you hitting a button, taking a full target combo to the face, which is still a knockdown, and with better Oki than sweep, so you didn't gain anything whatsoever. And because the opponent is slightly more likely to try to walk away from Ryu because they might hit buttons or not be able to hit good buttons, the same thing happens. So, in the end, it doesn't appear as if the designers were trying to say, we want Ryu to play as a rushdown character. They were actually saying, we want that when Ryu lands a fireball, even if it's blocked, you still can fight from close range. We'll give you all these close range options instead of having to deal with full gameplay.
I see.
Which basically meant that the fireball game that was mastered by so many Ryu players, that was basically, this is why you play Ryu. Because of being able to use this fireball game. Without it, you weren't good. That's pretty much gone now. And that was probably why Tokido was able to play Ryu so effectively in Season 1, because he could play him without doing that.
I see.
Now, Akuma obviously suits him better, but overall, the way Akuma's fireballs work at close range actually does a very similarly useful thing. The difference being that Akuma can only do it from close range, and Ryu, depending on how you understand the character, can do stuff like that and do it from anywhere. In fact, most Ryu players who are used to throwing light and heavy Hadoukens probably didn't adapt to the fact that the best Hadouken to throw in this game is effectively the medium one, because if you mess it up, or just on reaction, your fingers are closer to the medium punch for basically clipping people, doing shoryukens, etc. So at the moment, that's what Amara is trying to incorporate into the game, the fact that if you throw medium punch Hadoukens, even the execution failure of the Hadouken itself causes a mix-up to happen.
Useful.
And because the Hadouken spacing also causes your own upper hitbox to change, a lot of moves that would normally hit you don't come in at all, so your opponent has to worry a lot more. This basically means that she just gets to throw Hadoukens for free now, whereas before, it appeared or probably felt much more difficult than it does now. Because it's harder to jump on her, it's harder to see what to do, it's harder to tell what to punish, and it's much harder to decide when she's going to jump at you.
And throw.
So it's little things like that that high-level players are usually able to help mid-level and lower-level players with, rather than give a comprehensive concept of how to improve your game, they can tell you which part of your game is missing. And you can just try to incorporate that yourself and see what changes it makes. Maybe you like them, maybe you don't like them.
Alright then. This is a matchup I've fought a few times. But not necessarily one that I understand on the level that we've been going through with Alex.
Well, that's another thing to consider. Ryu is one of the characters in this game where the player puts their stamp on him quite a lot at lower levels, and they diverge toward the more suitable character for them as they get higher. But there are still at least 3 viable Ryu strategies until you get very high level, where I'm not sure anymore, because the only person that used to play the last style of Ryu is Daigo, and he has basically stopped, and he hasn't gone back to Ryu since things changed, so I don't know.
Well,
We are getting some CFN connection slowdown.
yes, I have
Either
both
way.
the loading and saving dialogue, but that's all I have. Black screens.
Interestingly.
Hopefully it
But
doesn't go
considering,
insane.
in terms of the Cammy versus Ryu matchup,
Uh-oh.
which we may not actually get,
Now I'm only saving.
It's go time.
Shall we try again?
actually, yes, it seems that it was not the full fail type. So it just probably needs a minor reset. So
And
here's
again,
what I
if
was
anyone on stream wants
discussing
to join
before.
us, the password is 2877, character select is on. You can just search up Amara, or... I think she is the host, so...
Actually, I don't think there is a full-on
Is there?
search system yet, which is sort of suspect, but
Well, hit search for 2 rounds, 2 matches, and see what you can find.
unfortunately, I basically gave the most obvious possible for this, so... If there are a lot of people on, it might not be so easy to get to it.
Alternately send
As
us
I
your
was saying,
CFN
though-
and we'll invite you,
I will fight
which might be a little easier.
Round 1.
The
So,
problem with this is, before, you fought her Ryu when she didn't understand any of this. So it's literally a different character you're facing now.
I see.
You need to think of it, as long as you are not applying pressure at the time, you have to consider, I am no longer fighting the same person. Fortunately, Cammy does have a lot of tools that tend to remain effective, but unfortunately for you, not all of them remain that effective. The short version is that Cammy has enough anti-fireball tools as a general thing to make Ryu's fireball game less effective, but in order to use them, she has to put herself at a lot more risk, so the Ryu player is able to simply throw less fireballs and spend more time doing the things that Ryu does when her opponent is trying to get around the fireballs. Like just hit stand medium punch or stand medium kick in neutral, for example. I've mentioned as before, Cammy is terribly weak to other people's stand medium kicks. To the point where I think at one point I mentally called it embarrassing.
I see.
But that was not in response to Cammy as a character. It was specifically in response to the fact that I could be getting completely bodied by a silver, super silver Cammy and start to hit Ryu standing, or hit Chun-Li's standing medium kick, and the match would entirely change. The reason for this is specifically because Cammy has to make a decision, timing-wise, about whether or not to respond to a strong standing medium kick. She has to make this decision immediately. You don't get to dance around. You don't get to figure out whether or not your opponent is doing something else, because a good standing medium kick is only -2. This is why people are not so fond of the Cammy mirror, because they by nature take advantage of their own weakness.
I see.
right after a standing medium kick, Cammy must immediately decide what button to hit. She does not get to go, okay, maybe not now, maybe this time, whatever. And it forces her to play with pressure a lot more than most Cammy players like to be forced to do. And tends to lead to a lot of weird stuff. Sort of like that. And because she has the tendency, therefore, to get counter-hit by standing medium kicks in neutral. Standing medium kicks never combo into anything, but it's basically saying, I can now hit any long-range button I want, and none of yours are going to be fast enough to beat it. So you have to block. You get hit by stand medium kick as Cammy, and your basic options are now 0.
I see.
If you get counter-hit by one.
Right.
If you get hit normally, you can try some other stuff and hope your opponent makes a mistake, but if you get counter hit, you just have to respect that most of the time. This applies to pretty much any character with a long range one. Fortunately, she gets away because not every character has a long range one and it doesn't come up. The problem with Ryu is that it basically restores Ryu's ability to play the fireball game with Cammy because Cammy must block, therefore Ryu can decide, am I repositioning or not? What you just did is basically a good decision, in that if you realize that Ryu is too close, you can hit crouch medium kick of your own. But again, that's in response to you blocking it, and it has a lot to do with whether or not you think you can get away. If Ryu hits with the crouch, with the stand medium kick as counter hit, it's completely Ryu's decision if he wants to reposition, jump in, wait and see what you're going to do. All of those things are now flatly Ryu's to decide, and not Cammy's in any way. At least with Chun-Li, you can be relatively assured that I'm going to be kind of silly sometimes and attempt to at least go for something that might hit you, giving you the chance to do, like, cannon spike or something. But with Ryu, you really don't have that option. And Ryu can be weird about it and just, like, what you realize at higher levels is that you could easily die this way because the easiest possible hit confirm off of the standing medium kick is the only possible hit confirm, namely activate V-trigger. Which is why this is one of the things that Daigo and Takedo learned very early into the game. That stand medium kick into V-trigger, where you would think, this is not good damage, it wasn't meant to be good damage, it was meant to beat Cammy and Kareem. Because they're not going to let Ryu get into space to do the other cancel on purpose. But they are going to, without any possibility of otherwise, let him do the other one. So as you can see, if Ryu hits that at the max range, you have no options.
Pretty much.
And since it reduces your pressure game so much, and you have to do craziness, Ryu also gets the ability to do more of his own craziness, which, as much as people dislike the idea of, he had lots of.
So the question becomes,
Now,
how
this
should
would
I
be
play
fine,
this?
except for the fact that Cammy and Kareem only have 900 health. So Cammy's answer to this, believe it or not, is sweep.
Okay. Why?
Because Ryu's ability to rift punish sweeps with a button other than the standing medium kick that you were already worried about is very minimal, actually. This is because Ryu's most damaging buttons, other than his own sweep, which you might bait him into using and then hit him with, don't hit crouchers. You can get caught in the axe kick, but the part of the way that works out for you is that if Ryu goes for the axe kick, then he had to be standing. So
Then
if Ryu went for the axe kick preemptively, you would have hit him.
Sure.
So the only time the sweep is technically wrong is if you get blocked and Ryu is really ready,
I see.
or you got a whiff, in which case axe kick is kind of slow and might not make it.
Sure. Alright. Alright then.
Now the reason for that, even though it seems to be counterproductive, if you've ever checked Cammy's hitboxes on her sweep and her medium kick, you'd probably be surprised to recognize that they're, I think, almost the same. And I think sweep wins by a little bit.
Well, I'm certainly surprised, and I'm going to actually look that up right now since I have a moment of downtime between my next match.
Of course, I would prefer that you do look it up because I could be confusing this with Jury, and if I am, then I don't want to misinform anyone. But I'm pretty sure that despite the look of the motions, the sweep actually reaches very slightly farther than the
Well,
crouching
we shall
kick.
know. We shall know momentarily. Pulling up Dantarian now. So we have crouch medium kick over somewhere. Ah, there we are. So, here. Alright.
Unfortunately, as in the Alex matchup, Ryu stand medium kick loses almost all of its usefulness. Interestingly, for some reason, I seem to manage with Chun-Li's zone, but Ryu's zone might be a little shorter. Or maybe it's just that their game plan is so different that you end up at different spaces.
It appears that her crouch medium kick is slightly farther than her crouch heavy kick, but not by a whole lot.
Okay then.
In fact, I would say that it is, I don't know, a hand width or something? I don't know.
I'm still technically wrong in that case because if your options are hit sweep or hit crouch medium kick, then you should probably hit the crouch medium kick.
Yes.
So we're going to count that as...
So I would say about 1/8 of her personal hurt box that it is extended by, which is something like a quarter of the... The other interesting thing, though, is actually, let me have a look at this. Yes, the crouch medium kick has a very high hurt box. Like, almost, I am checking that to make sure I did not mix it up with the standing medium kick. But yes, her crouch medium kick's hurt box extends far beyond the hit box, and is about up to chest height for her. It's about 2/3 of her height. Whereas her sweep's hurt box does not extend past its... Sorry, the sweep's hurt box does not extend past its hit box, and is only a sliver above it.
That was probably the reason for what I've seen happen. And this brings us back to actually why...
I'm actually surprised by this.
You should not always count on what the frame data tells you about a move. Frame data is a good place to go, but personal experience does matter a lot. What you should generally do is use frame data to inform you as to whether or not the thing you are seeing happen makes any sense.
Yes. And it's important to remember that frame data, as we all generally tend to read it, is specifically a summary, and a short one at that, of everything that's actually going on with all of those boxes moving around and the timings for things, the properties on everything. Not a whole lot is there. It's certainly a valuable summary, but as we've just seen, it sometimes is not the most informative thing, simply because it is losing the details in summary. Hello, a Norman.
So based on that, it is quite possible that through purely experience and nothing whatsoever to do with either the speed of the move or the potential for the forward hurt box, it might just be that because of the interactions between the two moves, it is actually flatly better for Cammy to hit sweep, and that's where I got that information.
That's quite possible. Yeah, you can apparently, that hurt box on her crouch medium kick, I can't think of a single move Ryu has that would not hit it, except maybe his stand heavy kick, which is, well, I suppose saying something. Especially if you consider that it's basically that it just becomes extremely whiff punishable by standing moves, because it won't counter hit them. But they will counter hit it very well.
It could be, for example, that if you make the decision instantly and you both happen to hit it on the same frame or similar, that Cammy will end up fine and Ryu will be the one that gets hit purely because of the hitbox interaction.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a thing that does happen.
Now, us old arcade grinders are used to trying all our options to find our solutions without depending on the frame data, not entirely because we didn't have any. I mean, it's not as if you couldn't find a way to figure out frame data, or something that was akin enough to frame data that understanding it was sufficient. It is simply that you looked at the move and decided, this looks like it might work.
Let's find out.
So I'm going to try it, even if everything else I know about the move would tell me, no, this is a terrible idea. You still try.
Yeah, because, I mean, what does it hurt? You just take little damage.
Well, depending on
learn something.
where you were actually getting your experience back in the day, it cost you a quarter. But
This is also true.
as soon as fighting games became a home console thing, that did change quite a bit.
Alright, now back to that Alex matchup.
So, going down one more layer, we've come to the conclusion that Cammy has to either go into some form of neutral jump mix-up, backdash out after blocking the flash chop, or delay slightly, probably, maybe doesn't even have to delay, and go for her turn knuckle. And that's basically usually the point where a mix-up ends, or more accurately where a sequence like this ends, where both players are now at the point where they have approximately 50-50 chances of being correct. Cammy gets, if Alex goes for his charge move, Cammy gets in for free again. As you know, that turn knuckle is actually plus, so she gets up pressure. If Alex attempts to immediately hit a button, especially one that he thinks will stop the turn knuckle, Cammy backdashes. She can usually get off the spiral arrow in time, or something else she likes. But if she does do the backdash and Alex finishes his charge and gets to do something immediately afterwards, then the chances are that she's not going to react in time. Now, sometimes moves actually do have further down that line. But the reason they don't normally is because the attacker normally reaches a point where they flatly can't block or escape the main thing that's going on. So the interaction at that point must end with someone actually getting hit. Because at that point, you're looking for people to do specials. And it's a mix-up between the interactions between specials. Or it loops back into something that already happens. For example, the pressure that Cammy gets when she actually lands Turn Knuckle is just a whole restart. It's a whole situation that we already know a whole in itself too. So even though it technically is going deeper into layers, we're deeper into layers we already covered somewhere else in our training or understanding the game.
That was interesting.
Just like mistimed that. I'm not sure it would have helped.
It was supposed to be EX.
No. Oh, well, in that case, it didn't really matter. We'll count that as you saving 1 meter by accident.
Indeed.
But now you have reached that point of the game where things just happen deliberately. Now most of us are happy about this, but some people do find the clinicalness of this sort of boring. To those people, if you have that feeling toward the game, I suggest something slightly different. Normally, if you feel it is boring, it is because you are not forcing enough interactions of your own.
Dang.
Basically, if your way of playing the game is to jump in and go into a sequence, and that same sequence leads to the same thing every time, then the problem is not necessarily with the game. The problem is that your way of getting in is always jumping. If you always jump and your opponent always blocks the exact same way, and it leads into the same mix-ups, and then you end up back in neutral and your first thought is, well, I guess I'll jump in again. Depending on the game, that might be the game's flaw, but you can't necessarily fault a game that has a good set of options because you personally only want to use one. On the other hand, if you're the sort of person who specifically enjoys just jumping, you're probably also the sort of person that enjoys these specific things that come from jumping and don't really care that much. In other words, you're Itabashi Zangief. Oh, unfortunate drop combo.
Not quite what I intended to have happen there. So now I'm at my meter. But okay then.
The other thing, however, is that once you actually understand most of this, Street Fighter stops feeling so frenetic as an overall thing and starts to feel somewhat slow even. It is at that point that you normally are able to go play games like Guilty Gear. Or at least to spend some time practicing Guilty Gear and going through the same layers and processes. People who easily do this can quickly become jaded with games like Street Fighter, but many of us need this. We can't just jump straight into Guilty Gear and start doing high-level block string analyses and figuring out where to burst and all those things without understanding the Street Fighter level of where this comes from. It can be good to go from Street Fighter to, say, KOF, where there are more movement options, but the overall flow is the same so that you can feel more comfortable with it. And from there, depending on your perspectives of what is fun or important, you can go into things like Marvel or the upcoming Dragon Ball Fighters. Okay, so now we are going to what is probably the last match of the night.
That sounds about right. I could tell that I was losing my focus a little bit towards the end, sort of reaching a stamina limit in that regard. And I'm sure it reflected itself in my play a little bit too, where I was not quite keeping up with everything that I had been preparing through the other rounds. I'm going to say, however, that I think that the V skill after that flash chop is not quite what I need, because it doesn't do me anything for him if he just stands there and there's nothing to stop him from doing that. However, that may be simply a hooligan moment in that case.
The reasoning there is, that is a style question, actually. Because
I suppose so.
if you prefer to play footsies even when you have the opportunity to start pressure, then there's no real reason to hit the turn knuckle, except if, for example, backdashing is terrible.
That's a point.
But at the range you end up at, standing absolutely still yourself is exactly the option that someone who prefers to play footsies and play in neutral should use.
But doesn't that just leave me open then to his damned head crush sort of problems? Although I suppose it also allows me to devote myself almost entirely to hitting them.
Which is what you did, actually. The last time you got into that situation, you went for head crush and you immediately did cannon spike.
Indeed. Yes, I think considering that, that is actually probably more likely to be my preference. I have a little more concern in V-Trigger, but Sledgehammer is not so bad if he's not charging it up anyway. I don't think. And if he does charge it up, well, then I can simply react to that and maul him. Because that's very easy to deal with once it's actually telegraphed. At least from those
So you
ranges.
get to play the game
a neutral jump.
more fully as an overall thing. And then you get to be frustrated like a high-level player when you go up against an Alex that doesn't know any of this and who just randomly hits buttons.
Indeed. And they are going to frustrate the hell out of me because I much prefer playing on this level, even if I'm not necessarily prepared for it in most of my matchups yet.
That is also what made the game so useful for forging relationships. Because if you met someone who did that sort of thing, you had a way to beat them, it was just annoying. Once you recognized that you had an annoying way to beat them, you'd use it. The result of that would be that your opponent would eventually feel completely shut down, as if they could not do anything. And then you'd explain to them, well, this is how this normally goes. This is why this normally goes this way. If you want to play like a maniac, that's completely fine, but just recognize why it's that.
Sure.
And often they would in turn improve. But if you were not able to explain what was going on, most of the time they would not listen to you whatsoever and either continue to lose terribly or use the opportunity of you trying to teach them to do the same thing as before them. This is probably the most salt-inducing thing in arcades back in the day, when you're trying to teach someone something and they just like take advantage of it and beat you.
I see.
Of course, this really didn't lead to much because it was considered disrespectful enough that if anyone was waiting for the game, most people would just be like, no, you go up, you go ahead, you take that, because they didn't want to play that person anyway. They wanted to play you.
Indeed.
So they were waiting for you to finish teaching the person who put up the quarter so that they could get on to the next match. And that could be very respectful. You could decide, well, okay, I can wait a couple minutes while you teach the newbie how to get a little better. But then if the newbie takes advantage of this and beats you, you're like, no, just take the run back, beat them, and we can get on to what we were doing. We've lost a lot of that in the arcade culture of these days. It's in the fact that here communication is not required for a battle lounge to function.
Yes.
And while I don't think it should be insisted on, it is a little bit difficult for some people to get used to. It is also a large reason why people got somewhat upset by the fact that voice chat became something that got completely removed from battle lounges, basically.
Alex wins.
Right, if I remember
Well, in
Street
any
Fighter
case-
4, there was actually voice chat within the game where you would automatically get connected communication-wise to your opponents in certain
Basically.
situations.
Either way, that's the end of our contribution for the night.
Indeed.
So we hope that anyone watching feels a little bit braver to join next time.
Indeed. In case you're
And
always
you'll
welcome to
see-
join these sorts of battle lounges. And hopefully you learned a little bit about how to think about the game depending on your level, or at least have some ideas now to try out. So, with that, have a good evening everyone, and see you again next Monday for another one of these battle lounges, and perhaps even one including you. This is Kanzuki Dynasty, and
Brilliant.
quite brilliant over there, signing out. Good night.